My name is Jennifer Kronk from the Assist Learning Podcast. I'm a proud member of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to right now. The opinions expressed are those of the individual hosts. Make sure you check out all the other great podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com and get ready because the learning begins in 3, 2, 1.
Like even moving on to a different district, that like brainwash state of like, but you do it for the students and you're not a good teacher if you're not at school from like 5 till 6 o'clock at night. And the conversation teachers would have like, oh, I can't believe so-and-so leaves at their scheduled time. How could they? Of course, everybody comes in on a Saturday morning. They just bring their children with them. Like I thought that's the way that it was. And I was feeling completely disconnected from things. It wasn't exciting anymore. Like it wasn't fun. I was struggling with the relationship with my husband. Like I lost friends, like my health, the stress weight. Like I just wasn't in a good spot. And, I remember talking to my husband so much and saying like, this has got to be different.
Welcome to the Burned In Teacher Podcast. I'm Amber Harper, and the educators on this podcast are brave enough to share their stories of burnout with the world. On BIT, we get real, we get honest, and we take action. Action against the burnout with stories from burned out teachers, advice from experts, and actionable steps you can take today to beat the burnout and become a happier, more fulfilled human being. Let's get started. Well, hey there, Burned In Teachers. Welcome to a special bonus episode of the Burned In Teacher Summer Self-Care Series and the Burned In Teacher Podcast. This is, of course, one part burnout and all other parts action, inspiration, and support for teachers dealing with burnout. If we've not met before, I am your host, Amber Harper, and as always, I'm absolutely thrilled and honored that you've decided to spend some time with me today, and I'm so grateful that you're here. I want to respect your time and jump into this interview, but I got to talk to you about something. Last week, we talked with Stephanie DeLussy about the lies that we tell ourselves. And as you've already noticed at the beginning of this episode, Sarah Kaminski, who is our guest today, knows a lot of those lies that we tell ourselves. So I don't care how long you've been teaching, where you teach, who you teach. You're here listening to this podcast for a reason. Whether you're a new teacher, you've transitioned from a different career, you're close to retirement, and all things in between. No matter where you are on your journey, this episode is about the transformation you can make if you make the right decisions about how you spend your time and who you spend that time with. This episode is for you. Now, like I said, 2 weeks ago, Stephanie DeLussy was on here talking about anxiety and the lies we tell ourselves. And I'm telling you, people, when I was a full-time teacher, I believed these lies that Sarah mentioned too. And then I decided to change that conversation. And that's exactly why I started this podcast. And that's exactly what this episode is all about. Now, I know you're starting your new school year. Either last week, maybe yesterday, maybe it's tomorrow, next week, next month. No matter when, you have to decide now that you're going to surround yourself with people who are going to help you change that conversation. Today's guest is Sarah Kaminski. She's a 6th grade English language arts teacher from Central Wisconsin, where she's taught for the last 6 years. She's been on the podcast before, but she was also a member of the Burned In Teacher Small Group Program this past spring. And does she have a serious story of transformation for you? We're going to dive into the interview here in a minute, but I have to let you know, and you may have already guessed it, that this episode is brought to you by the Burned In Teacher Training Course, which is the small group program that is nicely and neatly packaged into an 8-week online course, which I launched 2 weeks ago. And this is also sponsored by the bonuses that go along with it, the Out the Door by 4 mini course and the Burned In Teacher Training ebook that scratches the surface of the Burned In process. All of them brought to you for only $97 if you register by this Saturday, August 10th. Now, if you're listening to the replay, don't freak out. The bad news is that you can't get all of these for $97, but you can get all of these things separately. The Out the Door by 4 mini course will be sold separately starting in mid to late September, and the ebook is on sale now. But Burned In Teachers, you can get all of these things now for $97. I'm not going to push this anymore, but the reason I'm so passionate about sharing this opportunity with you is because it works, and you don't need me to tell you that. If you go to burnedinteacher.com/success stories, you're going to hear some amazing testimonials from teachers who have participated in the program. If you go to burnedinteacher.com/work with me, you'll learn more about the Burned In Teacher online training course, but also how you can earn, are you ready? 3 graduate credits for taking this course. I have joined forces with Midwest Teachers Institute, and they have joined forces with colleges from around the country that want to offer credits, graduate credits, for teachers who are extending their knowledge and honing in on their craft. So go to burnedinteacher.com/work with me to learn more about the online training course and, of course, how you can earn some credits for your time and your work and your transformation. Sarah will tell you all about her transformation because of Burned In Teacher in this interview. Okay, deep breath. Let's get into it because it's going to inspire you to change the conversation and to start your transformation to become a Burned In Teacher just like Sarah. Let's get into the interview. Burned In Teachers, I'm so excited to introduce you again to my friend and someone who has been so inspirational to me in the Burned In Teacher community. Her name is Sarah Kaminski, and she is not new to the Burned In Teacher podcast. This is actually her second time on. She was involved in an excellent conversation about student engagement and relationships on episode 33. So I definitely encourage you to go back on burnedinteacher.com/blog and check out the podcast episode with her and Alexandra. It was a fantastic conversation, and we got a lot of insight from her and Alexandra about their vision for their relationship with their students. And you can also hear her story of burnout on there. Sarah, I cannot say enough fabulous things about you. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me on again.
So I asked Sarah to come on here and she can tell you a little bit about herself. And actually, Sarah, why don't we start with that? Go ahead and give us a quick summarization of you as a teacher and as a human being.
All right, sure. So right now I am a 6th grade ELA teacher at a middle school in central Wisconsin. So this is I think it's my 6th year here. I'm really bad with those numbers. It's my 6th year in this district, but I think it's my 7th year teaching. Mm-hmm. I've taught in this district for a while. Usually my history has been English, but this year I added in reading. My first year teaching was kind of one of those like horrible teaching stories.
Preach. I had the same experience my first year teaching. It was extremely difficult.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm glad I survived that year to get to this point where I'm at, but it was pretty tough. So, but it's been a lot of learning experiences. That was my year of I think I had 5 different titles to be first time, to be full-time and being a first-time teacher. So that's kind of been my teaching journey, but it's been interesting. I was listening to the last podcast that you just aired, and she was talking about how it was her calling. And I've never been one of those people that this was my calling. It just kind of happened into it. And I'm this is a really good fit for me and my personality. And it's kind of been keeping attuned to that. That's kind of been the driving force to kind of keep doing what I'm doing.
I love that you're being so honest about that, because that's my journey too. And honestly, Sarah, I feel like this is why you and I connect so well, because I never grew up feeling like I wanted to be a teacher my whole life. And I adore those people that, they grew up knowing that this was their calling and this is what they wanted to do and this is what they're doing. They're living their dream. And, that's what Burned In Teacher is here for, is to help them if their dream is turning into a nightmare. But I love that you're being so vulnerable and admitting that, because teaching is not always something that we grow up desiring to do. And that certainly wasn't the case for me. So another thing, Sarah, I want you to highlight, because your donkeys are so cute. And she posts pictures of them in the Burned In Teacher tribe
Facebook group, and I just love them so much. So that's another way that we connect too, is we both have a love of equestrian, and we love horses. And so tell us a little bit about that. Is that something that you just really find a lot of passion outside of school with?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, that was like, I was that one kid, that crazy kid in school that just loved horses. That was me. And that, right. It's nice to have a fellow, one of those people. And that's just been kind of like my identity, I guess. And actually thinking about it, that was one of the ways I got into teaching. It's kind of like a weird connection, but I used to give riding lessons. Like I used to be a clinician, and I had like this whole group of kids that we would go to the fair together. And like I launched a ranch camp for a local Y. But yeah, that's kind of like been a part of my identity. But that was one of the things that I noticed, like when I was starting to kind of burn out, was I lost that. Like there was several years where like my horses weren't at home. They were at my parents' house. I didn't like do anything with them. I didn't find time to kind of grow that side of myself.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, it wasn't until kind of realizing like, no, like you need to kind of grow that side of yourself to be the best person that you can be, as like not even professionally speaking. But yeah, we got back into it. Actually had our second show on Sunday.
Oh, that's so exciting. Oh my gosh. That just hearing about horse shows, it gets me all giddy and excited, because I know what that life is like. It's so exciting. The super early mornings, the late nights.
Yeah.
It sounds horrible, but it's actually
But it's glorious.
So I love that you mentioned that that's where you noticed the burnout setting in, is because you were not doing the things that lit you up outside of school. You weren't pursuing those passions outside of school anymore. So that's a great segue into this conversation that I want to have with you today, because if I didn't mention it earlier, Sarah was a participant in the spring 2019 Burned In Teacher Tribe program, the small group program that I put on last year, and or this past spring. And she had such an incredible transformation that I wanted to have her come on here and talk about the difference between Sarah Kaminski 2018-2019 school year to the beginning of the 2019-2020 school year, and just kind of share her story and what she noticed that changed in her by having that accountability group, that support system, those different perspectives, and, you know, just to really open up about the action that she took to go from where she was in her burnout to where she is now. So I know that's kind of a really loaded way to kind of transition into this section, but Sarah, just kind of give us a picture of where you were when you found Burned In Teacher, and what it was that you were searching for.
So it wasn't, I guess, you know, it was a long time coming. Like, I guess my entire school career has been super stressful. I mean, I didn't even go into teaching right after college. Like I felt even right after student teaching, and I was like, I need to make sure I really want to do this. And I thought it just was the way that it was. I'm like, you know, like that first teaching job where I was 8th grade math, 6th grade accelerated, or 8th grade English, 6th grade math, EL coordinator, AP coordinator, student council advisor, GT coordinator. I just thought that was life. Like I thought that's what it was being a teacher. And kind of getting into that, like even moving on to a different district, that like brainwash state of like, but you do it for the students, and you're not a good teacher if you're not at school from like 5 till 6 o'clock at night. And the conversation teachers would have like, oh, I can't believe so-and-so leaves at their scheduled time. How could they? Of course, everybody comes in on a Saturday morning. They just bring their children with them. Like I thought that's the way that it was. And I was feeling completely disconnected from things. It wasn't exciting anymore. Like it wasn't fun. I was struggling with the relationship with my husband. Like I lost friends, like my health, you know, the stress weight. Like I just wasn't in a good spot. And, you know, I remember talking to my husband so much and saying like, this has got to be different. Like there has to be something different out there. And he would always say like, it's just a job. And I know some teachers take a little bit offense to that, like, but it's a calling. But it boils down to, this is a job where you're completely replaceable. And I wasn't replaceable at home. And it really hit me when I had my second child. I'm like, I don't want her to live here. I don't want either of them to live here. And I ended up, I don't remember whose podcast, like I was listening to somebody else's podcast and I stumbled on yours. And
that's okay. That does not hurt my feelings.
No. I mean, it was, it was one of those like serendipitous moments where it just like all fell in. I'm like, oh, here's the stories and everything. And I remember the first time you launched your small group program, like I thought about joining, but I didn't, because I thought that like I've only been teaching 6 years. My story isn't as bad as somebody else's, or like I kind of had that mentality. And I think I joined the second time like one of the last days. I'm like, I really wanted to, like, oh, I'm just going to do that. And like getting over that shame, like that accepting of like knowing that there's something better, and then kind of taking that step, that was the best thing I've ever done. Like the last 8 weeks of school, that's when we were together, was by far the best 8 weeks that I've had in my complete teaching career.
So first of all, I am going to quote you. Okay. Oh, no. And you know my opinion about teaching. All right.
Yeah.
I felt this way. I had a realization myself when I was going through burnout. Teaching is a job where I am fully replaceable. And I have quoted in the group Amy Morin saying, we are not that important.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. And it's hard to swallow because we want to believe that we are the superhero and we are all things to all people, but we're not. We are replaceable in our jobs. They will hire somebody else the second, or they will search for somebody else the second we resign, or the second we are not able to come in, or getting subs, things like that. But I love this. Teaching is a job where I am replaceable, but I'm not replaceable at home. You can't replace me as a mom. You can't replace me as a wife. I love that. That gives me goosebumps. That is such a beautiful way to think of this. And so you got to the point where you kind of didn't talk yourself out of it, but just didn't think it was the right time the first time around for the small group program. But the second time you joined and you said it was 8 weeks of total transformation. That's so exciting for me to hear, because that's what I want people to feel. I want them to feel empowered. I want them to feel the change. I want them to take the action. So walk us through a little bit, what were your feelings kind of going in before our week 1 meeting? And then when did you start to feel that change happening?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was completely nervous about starting. Like I've never done anything like this. And like taking that time just for myself, like not even professionally, but just as like a person, was super intimidating, because it's not something that I was used to doing. But I really became like excited about our weekly meetings. Kids went to bed early. I had some time by myself. It was glorious. And I think like that first week of like that beginning where you are, that was super important. Just like that acceptance that, I think it was something that you had said too, that like, if you can name it, you can tame it. And that's what actually, and I apologize, I don't remember what her name is, but I think it was like Mrs. D, but she called like Dolores.
Well, Lori Desautel's actually quoted Dan Siegel as saying, if you can name it, you can tame it. So that's not my quote. I'm definitely not going to. Okay. But it matches so well with naming our burnout. And I had already created the quiz and the cheat sheet and all of that stuff to help name it. But when she said that, I was like, oh my gosh, that proves that this is not just a willy-nilly woo-woo quiz. Like, if you can name your burnout, you can tame it. And then Stephanie DeLussy, who was just on the podcast, she actually named her anxiety Dolores, which I thought is, it's kind of silly and funny. And she said she wanted to add like a comedic value to it because it just helps you deal better. But it's so powerful because it becomes a thing that you can control or work on controlling, when it's not just you feeling like, oh my gosh, I am crazy. I'm crazy. I'm a bad person. I'm crazy and I'm ashamed of it and I'm not going to talk about it.
And that's what, like, naming it and like being able to talk through, like, there's other people that feel the same way. Like there's nothing wrong with a person for feeling burnt out or exhausted, or that they want something better. And I think that was kind of that, like that bringing guard down moment of like, I'm not alone. I'm not a bad teacher. There's other people that feel the same way. And that kind of started this like self-acceptance journey that like it's okay. And I know what it is now and the things that I need to work on. And I apologize, I don't remember all the letters, but like it was a little bit further down, a couple weeks in, and it was I think we started with like the challenges, like naming your challenges. And I think that's where we played the why game.
Reflect on your challenges. That's week 3.
Yeah, that one it was so empowering getting to like the base of it. Cause I think we talk so much like, well, I'm tired, but like, well, why are you tired? Or why are you feeling, anxious, or like kind of getting down to like, what's the root of it? Because then you can actually start to grow from there. And that complemented really well within like the strengths week, because it's kind of like, this might sound really bad, but broke a person down to like, what's the bare bones, like what's going on? And then how can you use who you are as like an individual to kind of overcome those things.
What you just said reminds me of a quote that I love from Deepak Chopra. I think I'm saying that correctly.
Yeah.
Maybe he's listening. I'm sorry, Deepak. But he says, all great things are preceded by chaos, or something like that. So I think about it as like renovating a house, in order to make something more beautiful or to make it the way that you want it to be, you have to tear some things down. You have to make a mess. It's not fun. It ain't pretty, but it has to be done. I think I heard another person say, I'm going to say it. I'm going to quote my dad. It works in construction. He says, you can't polish a turd.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
absolutely.
We definitely do the hard stuff. And so I love that you're bringing up these points, because there's such important points that we go through in the group and that are going to be in the course that is launching. But so tell us a little bit more, if you'd like to go into more depth about the different weeks that we went through, throughout the Burden process. Or you can talk about, the things that you started to change. What are some actions that you took that you didn't see as either appropriate or attainable, or, things that you just didn't see for yourself in the past?
I'm like, the whole thing was just so amazing. Like, I remember that last.
I'm not paying her to say
who
this.
Am I? No, absolutely not. No, I mean, I remember that last week going like, I can take on the world, man. Like, bring it. It was just, I think like the one thing that really helped me was that like support group and like talking through that. I mean, like all weeks were so great, but like that negative self-talk that I had that had just kind of like built after all of these years, and kind of getting that brainwashed into what I thought it was supposed to be, and why do I feel this way, and I shouldn't feel this way, and kind of owning my story and like changing that like self-talk to be like a stronger person and a feeling like a more creative, capable person, like really helped. Like, it's okay to share my story, and kind of feeling like I had a voice was super helpful. And it was like, I felt healthy, like emotionally healthy. And then I noticed like the way I was able to lead my team changed, because like I felt like a stronger person, and the way I was able to help my students changed. Like I felt like I was in a better emotional place, and that I could, share some of those things with the students. I did play, like one of the kids was trying to do something. I can't remember what it was, but I remember we did the why game with the kids.
Oh yeah, you did mention that in the group, that you were actually, that's a wonderful way to approach those challenges with kids, for sure. And I love also that you brought up that you went from that negative self-talk, that feeling of not being capable, to becoming a more creative and capable person. I'm taking notes as you're talking.
Yeah, I see that.
Saying is gold. You actually started a podcast, your own podcast. So
yeah, I did.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I'd always have like these weird ramblings on like the way home, like from getting the kids or something. And it just like, it was, I don't know, a way of like decompressing or something. And like, I'm like, well, nobody would ever want to like actually listen to these weird things that I have to say. Like, that's kind of was my first talk, like self-talk. And then after going through the course and like kind of regaining my footing and understanding that like we were put on this earth to create, like we all have a creative entity that, should come out and to help make the world better. And I was like, you know what, let's just do it. And then I started recording and it felt so amazing just to be able to create something.
I love that you said, just do it, because there are so many things that I've done in my life, especially when I decided that I was not going to continue to let things happen to me. I was going to decide how I was going to live my life. And one of the first things that I did was whenever I decided that I wanted to become a Google certified educator. And when I remember when I went through the trainings and the modules and the lessons, and then I went to take the test, and I'm like, I don't know if I'm ready. And I'm just like, F it. And I clicked the button. And then I did it again whenever I applied for Google Innovator. And then I did it again when I started the Burned In Teacher Facebook group. And I did it again whenever I started the podcast. I've done it so many times. And you never know. You never know what's going to come out of taking those risks. And that's why I love saying, stop being a victim of circumstance, become a taker of chance. And sometimes taking chances is so scary, but it's so necessary. And it's also so relative. What is taking a big risk for you might not be a big risk for somebody else, but it's all about your journey, your story. And I love that you're sharing this stuff with us. It's fantastic. So did I interrupt you? Did you have something else you wanted to share?
No, you're good.
So tell us about Sarah Kaminski going into this school year. When do you start school?
I don't know the exact date. I know it's one of the last week in August is like our first time back, like as like our teacher time back. The kids come back after Labor Day, I think.
Okay.
August is already filled with dates that I have to be here. But like I don't feel as nervous about the year. I mean, I'm kind of hitting that like summer's almost over anxiety right now as I looked at my August calendar, but like I feel in such a better place of like managing some of the stress of the things that are coming up, and knowing that I have like a support system to go back to, like you feel so alone sometimes, and you can't necessarily always go to people in your same circle. Like I can always talk to teachers in my district, but seeing somebody outside of that circle always gives like a better perspective on like how to address things. I feel a lot more relaxed going into this year. Like, it's going to work out. Like we have this, we got this, and feeling a lot more like I know how to take care of myself a little bit better to kind of take care of like my kids and my team. And kind of bringing those together. I'm super excited about trying to bring some of like the stuff that we talked about in to help support my team members a little bit better.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, that makes me so excited. I cannot wait to hear how that goes for you. So I'm so glad to hear that. But I also want to highlight the last letter of the Burned-In process, which is never settle. And we talk a lot in that last week about what happens when, not if, but when things get hard. When something happens out of the blue, when life happens. We talk about preparing for that hardship, and that's not being fatalist, that's not being negative, that is being realistic. So can you tell everybody who's listening today, what are your plans for when things get hard?
Begin where you are.
You're such a good student.
Right. Well, that I'm in the right profession then.
You are.
So I think like just taking that chance to like stop and go like, okay, like what's going on in my immediate world right now? Like, why am I feeling this way? And trying to going back to that, like, okay, this is where I am. Why am I here? What are things that I can control? Like kind of start like going back through that process and then figuring out like, well, what can I do to, like, what do I have control over? I think that's always been like the biggest thing, like, because there's things happening in teaching all the time, and there's things that we have control over, and there's things that we don't have control over, and kind of understanding like what I have and those things that I can't, like, how can I accept those things, like, as the direction, and how can I move on without fear and apprehension to kind of create a positive outlook. And definitely, I know this year I want to do a lot better job of like scheduling in times to do things like for me. I think it was last year my husband even said, he's like, I can tell you haven't been to the barn in a while.
It's therapeutic.
I know. And you walk in there and I'm like, oh, horse smell.
We were at I have a side note, we were at the fair this week, and I love going into the horse barn and just going,
yeah.
It makes me feel like I need to bring that back into my life. But so I think this is coincidental because you don't know, you have signed up for the masterclass that's taking place this coming Thursday on August 1st.
Yes.
So if you're listening to this episode further in the future, there will be another masterclass planned another time. So I gotcha, don't worry. But we're actually going to talk about that. That's part of planning for the weekends and nights that you're dreaming of, that you want in your life. So we're definitely going to talk about that. And it's not bad to schedule in time with your family. You're not a selfish person by scheduling in that realistic self-care, those things that you do just because you enjoy doing them.
Yeah. And there was a lot of, I've heard that a lot, like you have to be intentional about your time and like blocking out times. Like time blocking has been something that was super helpful for me this year.
Mm-hmm.
And like, actually it's like saying, I'm working till this time, the rest of this is time for my kids. And that's been super helpful. And like making sure I get those times in for myself too.
Oh, so exciting. It's like you've already been like looking at what is going to be happening in this masterclass. You know me so well.
I'm so excited for it. Like completely excited.
It's going to be a party. So if you're watching this video in the because I'm going to post this video. I warned Sarah, I said, I am going to post this video because I know it's going to be so golden and so many people need to hear your story. So definitely go to burnedinteacher.com/masterclass if you just try it out. Hopefully you're listening to this at a time where you can actually join this amazing opportunity for you to learn how to take control of your time and create that work-life balance that you want. But Sarah, before we sign off today, is there anything else that you'd like to tell our listeners or our viewers?
Well, just understanding that there is no shame in feeling burnt out. Like I thought it meant that I was a bad teacher and that this, like all of these horrible things I used to think about that, but there is no shame in knowing that. And I think that comes from like the shift in society right now that like being able to talk about mental health.
Mm-hmm.
So just not having shame in it and then finding a support group that works for you is super, super important. It's not an easy journey to go on alone.
Yeah. And that's what I tell, people that listen to the podcast or, our Facebook group. If I'm not a support group for me, if you're not ready for this step, if you're not ready to open up to strangers, because I'm a stranger to you, maybe people in the Facebook group, if you've not joined the Facebook group, definitely do that. But if you're not feeling vulnerable enough or strong enough in your, conviction to really open up and tell your story, that's okay. But if we're not the people for you, if I'm not the person for you, that's fine. But you have to find somebody. So whether that's, hopefully you have a teacher support system at your school, or you have, a strong family system, or you have another teacher in another school somewhere that, used to teach together and now you don't, but you still talk about it to someone. There is no shame. And if you have to find a support system of people that are outside of your school, do it, but find somebody.
Yes, absolutely. Preach.
Yes, right? Woo! We can talk forever about this. I know we can, right? Sarah. So thank you so much for your time today. I'm so excited to get this message out to teachers. And I know I cannot wait to see what you do in your career. I'm so excited to know you and to see your transformation. It's been incredible.
That is so sweet of you. Thank you so much for all of your support and guidance. It's been utterly life-changing.
Oh, well, you're the one who did the work. You're the one who made the decision. So you need to give yourself a pat on the back too.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Bye, Sarah.
See ya.
You know how you meet people and you just know that you were meant to meet? That's how I feel when I talk to Sarah. Her ability to activate and to actually create change that needs to happen is so incredibly inspiring. And I'm so grateful that she came on the show again to tell you about her transformation. By the way, speaking of creating change, I wanted to tell you the name of her podcast. It's called Changing Mindsets, Changing Schools. I'll have a link to it in the show notes, but if you check it out on Spotify, you should be able to find it. So here's what I want you to do. Number one, like Sarah said, stop the shame and seek support. Those are the two biggest factors that are going to get you out of your burnout. The second thing is I want you to go to your bathroom or to your dining room, somewhere where there's a mirror. Go ahead. It's just you and yourself. I want you to see how your body reacts when you say to yourself the things that you believe about your current reality. How do you feel? How does your body react? If your eyes well up with tears, or it's hard to list all the things you expect or others expect of you, and you've not sought support, it's time. The third thing is go to burnedinteacher.com/work-with-me and learn more about the support that I and hundreds of other teachers want for you. It isn't enough to say things will be different. You have to do something different. Until next time, take a deep breath. You just took another step to becoming a burned-in teacher. Burn on, everybody.